Well, welcome everyone to our conversation this week, and you'll notice that I'm not having a conversation with Meg, having a conversation with Karen Ella, who has joined us as Supply Minister for the next 6 months or thereabouts. So we're very, very happy to welcome Karen, and you'll get to meet Karen as she travels around the partnership if you're watching this from one of the partnership congregations. But I might let Karen introduce herself a little bit so we can hear something about her.
Thanks, Annette. Hi, everyone. It's a great delight for me to be here for the 6 months and however long. I'm a third-year candidate for ministry at the moment, and my background is I had about 20 years as a community pharmacist, and then I've been a chaplain at Royal Melbourne and the Royal Children's Hospitals and a bit of supply work, and here I am. So really lovely to be here, and I'm looking forward to meeting lots of you and exercising ministry amongst you. So thanks, Annette.
Well, it's great to have you. And of course you won't be living here in the partnership, but you're not far away, are you?
I'm down at Melton, not far away at all.
So we'll be continuing for the time being during these conversations, and yes, it'll be Karen and me, or sometimes we hope to involve some other people. If you'd like to be one of our conversation partners, feel free to get in touch, and we'll include you in what we do as well. So on to this week's readings, Karen, and you were going to start us off, I think, with a poem.
Yes, I have a poem. It's written by Jenny Gordon. She's a Presbyterian minister down in Gippsland now. And this is a poem that she wrote a few years ago now. She calls it Mission, and it speaks to our gospel reading today. How I longed to go home, town that taught me to walk, whose dusty streets I see in dreams, filled with familiar rhymes of sight, sound and smell, house of shelter, arms of welcome, well-worn tales to tell. But I could never go back. Once I had embarked on the journey, because the box they kept for me was far too small, and I can do no more than wonder at what they're missing while I'm kissing them goodbye. Now I am sending you. Go and be unencumbered by homesick longings for the past, lest you should miss the raging, healing, babbling, baptismal beauty of the day. Take nothing. Shake off rejection. Leave your unfettered blessing. And when the going gets too tough, my flowing grace will be enough.
Thanks, Karen. That's beautiful. I love that phrase, the babbling baptismal beauty of the day.
Yes. Well, I'm not great at being reminded of what a beautiful day we have each day. It's a helpful thing to, I think, to be grateful for what we have. I think it's a good practice to be in.
Yes. So lots in that poem and in the readings that we're going to focus on, which is the Mark reading and the Corinthians reading, aren't they, for today? We hope people might read the others, but they're the ones that we're particularly going to talk about, aren't they, today? Jesus returning to his hometown, as the poem said, and being put in a box, the box of, being the hometown boy. And that was just too small, wasn't it, really, to contain Jesus and what he had in store. And they missed out by putting him in the box, didn't they? He only got to do a few things there. We know from earlier in Mark that his fame had spread throughout Galilee, so we assume that the stories of what Jesus had been doing had arrived in Nazareth, and they might have heard them. But for me, his hometown people sound very cynical about, who is this? What is this wisdom that he's talking about that's been given to him? Not the kind of reaction you'd hope for in your hometown.
Yeah, that hometown crowd, they're a tough crowd. So it reminds me of what we sometimes can do with the people that we meet and the people that are amongst us. We can sometimes put them in a box and not expect much from them.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when they're given opportunity, they can do amazing things and teach us amazing things. So, even in this putting Jesus in a box, it's reminding us to not put others in a box, that we're always bigger than what we see or what our impressions are or our preconceptions. Yeah. So it's an invitation to have a generosity about what people might bring. Yeah.
And alongside that too, I think sometimes we put all of God in a box, and we think that God might only come to us in particular ways, or is God only in the church? Can we hear God's voice from other places as well? Is a question, and I hear God in all kinds of places, but if we just say, oh no, God can only speak to us through particular ways, and through just the Bible and just Christian music, for example, are we putting God in a box in the same way as the hometown people put Jesus in a box, I wonder?
Well, it's really interesting, this Mark reading, where there's not a lot of attention being given to the calling, but a lot of attention is given to the sending. So, as disciples, we're called and we're gathered, but then we're sent.
Yes.
There's not much about the gathering at all, but what we do when we're being sent. So it invites the question for us: what does it mean to be people who are sent?
Yes.
And what is it we're sent for? And
how are we to be in being sent? Because in this, the disciples are they have each other, which is really important, isn't it? That they've gone out in community, but they don't have much in the way of a safety net, do they? To fall back on.
That's right. They're actually placed in a very vulnerable position, and they're actually going to have to rely on the generosity and hospitality of others. So there's a certain sense of having to trust in God's provision, but it's not always going to go smoothly by the sound of things.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it's a good message too, into not worrying too much about when things don't go smoothly, when everybody doesn't just fall at your feet and say, oh yes, you have the answer. That if people aren't listening to you, then you only have a limited amount of time and energy, and use it wisely, isn't it?
Yep. And dust it off and move on.
Yeah.
Don't dwell on it and let it get you down. Just move on to the next place. Because what we have to share is really valuable and important, and there are people that really need to hear and experience the message of God's grace and love.
Yes. Yeah. And for me, this was a really good message to us in the church today, where we've been used to being the ones who've been able to invite people in, come to the church and join this. Come, in the past, we had the church, tennis club and cricket club, and there were all sorts of activities around the church. And now that's not happening to the same extent. And here's a model of actually going out, as you said, being sent, rather than us being the focus of people coming into us. It's going out into the world, isn't
it? Yeah. Well, Jesus is here for the world, that people will have life and have it in abundance. Yeah. I'm sort of reminded of my ministry, especially when I was chaplain at the Children's Hospital. I was supported by my home congregation, but also worked in a department, so I wasn't on my own. However, you go into a pastoral conversation, and I was the line in the Corinthians reading, "My grace is sufficient," because as a chaplain, you really only go in, you take yourself in there. There's no tricks or other things to take. It's just your whole self, and trust that that's enough. So, a pastoral presence, a presence of a ministry of presence is quite a valuable thing. And, you know, I met people that say, oh, I wondered when someone was going to come. where have you been, you know? Yeah. And it's, you know, a ministry of surprises. You never not quite know what the day will hold and what you might be called upon to do, who you might be called upon to pray with. Yeah, what you might be there to witness. It just, yeah, there's this notion I read earlier, the spirituality of being on the road, and it's the lightness of the ministry, I think, that to be free enough to respond to the needs as we meet them. There's something liberating about that.
Yes. And this has just occurred to me as you were speaking, and we were talking about, you know, putting God in a box and where you might find God. I bet there would not be many people who would think that a place you would find God would be in a hospital ward. But there you were, being God's hands and feet and heart to people. And I imagine, back to you as well, I imagine there were times when you found God in unexpected ways in the rooms that you walked into.
Very unexpected ways. You know, it wasn't often that a patient would pray with me, like offer prayer themselves. Two of them were in the psychiatric unit, and, you know, one was a lady with dementia, but she was really appreciative of the presence and she prayed for me. It was like, wow, you know. I was tempted to think that I might be wasting my time, but no, this lady had an absolute generosity and the gift of God's love. And it reminded me that, you know, every one of us has something that can show God's love and grace. Yeah, the delights and surprises are remarkable.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and we've been talking a little bit about that in the partnership in the last couple of weeks. Almost asking the question, what can I do, or what can we do to serve the gospel, the good news of Jesus, in the community today? And it might be a small thing, it might be one thing, offering a prayer, you know, welcoming someone, sharing something small with someone. And we all have the capacity to be those people on the road. We don't have to go out and it be a hard slog, but wherever we are, wherever God puts us and calls us, God also gives us the gifts that we need, whatever it is that we need in the moment, isn't it? And it's that love. I reckon it's that lovely combination of, we go together. You know, Jesus sends out the disciples in community, and we all have our community. We have hopefully a community of faith around us, but there is also our own personal relationship, our own the gifts that only we can bring. You know, each one of us as an individual has particular gifts that the church needs, that the world needs, as we're sent.
And that's one of the joys of being in community, is that there's opportunity for someone to recognise gifts that we might not have even considered of ourselves. Like, I remember being told, oh, you're really creative. How about you get involved with our, 75th anniversary celebrations? And it's like, oh, well, I'll give it a go. Yeah. And learning that I had capacities that I had no idea about. Like, that's one of the remarkable joys of community. Yeah. So, the opportunity is to help people identify their own gifts and graces and bring them to life. Yeah.
Yes. So let's try and make sure that we're doing that this week, like looking out for the gifts and graces of others and noting them and listening out for where we're being called and where we're being sent to within the grace of the loving God who calls us.
We look forward to the week.
Yes. Amen.